homes, with about 45% of the population being single. So whatever a home looks like for you right now, we all have people we're connected to by birth, blood, marriage, or choice. We call those people family. And the degree to which we find and offer belonging to and with those people will have a profound impact on their lives and ours. So in the next several weeks, we're going to be identifying 7 values of homes that provide true belonging. Now, I'll tell you up front what those 7 are going to be so you know what's coming. Our homes become places of true belonging when we value faithfulness, trust, nurture, singleness, faith, hospitality, and grace. Now, we may mess with the order and with the words just a little bit, but you pretty much know where we're headed. Today, we're going to begin with faithfulness. We're going to discover what faithfulness is and how we can offer it to the members of our family. To do that, we're going to look at what we often call the Holy Family, the family of Jesus. One of the few functional families that we find in the Bible. We're going to discover that even this family, this Holy Family, struggled sometimes to find belonging with each other. So let's go to the Gospels today. We're going to list those 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that record for us the life and teachings of Jesus. We're going to dip into a couple of them, the Gospel of Luke and Matthew and John. And let's just follow this family's journey towards true belonging and see what we might learn from them along the way about faithfulness. So let's begin at the beginning, Matthew chapter 1, verse 16. This is how the birth of Jesus Christ came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be with child through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and took Mary home as his wife. Now, with the Christmas story still fresh in your minds, some of you thought I had lost my place and gone back a few weeks. With the Christmas story still fresh in our minds, we don't have to do a lot of explaining about all the challenges facing this family here. But what I want us to notice is that Mary and Joseph had a decision to make. This was not the kind of beginning they had imagined. There had to have been all kinds of confusion and hurt and disappointment, not to mention scandal. They had every reason for calling off the engagement. I mean, that's what any God-fearing, reasonable person would have done. And that's exactly what Joseph was preparing to do. But in response to the prompting of God's Spirit, Joseph decided to believe Mary and to stick with her, even under these unusual circumstances. And Mary decided to stick with him, even though his initial instinct was to leave her. And that really is where faithfulness begins, with a decision to stick with each other, even when the future is uncertain. Mary and Joseph had no idea what they were getting into, what kind of child this was going to be, how people were going to treat them, what else God was going to ask of them. But they decided that whatever the future held, they wanted to face it together. So faithfulness is about sticking with each other, even when the future is uncertain. It's about loyalty and commitment It's about showing up and not giving up, even when you don't have everything figured out. And this is one of the values that family members offer to each other. We make a commitment to stick with each other, even when there are reasons not to. Even when others might decide to turn away or give up, or others might lose interest. Now, occasionally you'll find a friend who will make that kind of commitment to you, and it's wonderful when you do. But this is what we expect of our family members, that they will be there for us, no matter what. That's why faithfulness in marriage is so important to a family's well-being. It sets the pace. It establishes some boundaries. It creates a safe place. Even though young Cassandra, Brene, struggled as a child, as long as her parents were together, she was okay. It's when their marriage began to fail that she began to flounder. Faithfulness in marriage creates a great sense of security and belonging. And that's why living together without being married is really a bad idea. I know it seems like it might be a good idea, a way to save some money at a critical time in life, a way to kind of test drive the relationship and see if this thing is going to work. The problem is when there's no decision. And so when there's no decision, there's no commitment. And when there's no commitment, there's no safety. And when there's no safety, there's no freedom. Freedom to be your true self. Freedom to try and learn and explore and fail and figure things out together. Whatever sense of belonging there is conditional. It depends on circumstances, as long as things work out. It depends on performance, how well we please each other. It depends on the whims of human nature and emotion. I know many couples, younger couples especially, seem to have a hard time getting to that place of commitment, and they're wanting to try things out together. And let me just say, if you find yourself in that kind of a spot, at a certain point, you just need to make the decision. Now, not recklessly or carelessly, but when you sense that this is the person, make that commitment. And you'll figure the rest out together. You don't have to work everything out, iron everything out, figure everything out. Faithfulness begins with a decision to stick with each other, whatever the future holds. And our homes become places of true belonging when we value faithfulness, not just between husbands and wives, but between parents and children, between brothers and sisters, between extended members of our families, aunts, uncles, cousins, once and even twice removed, maybe. And faithfulness begins with that decision. There's no way a couple of 20-somethings know what the future holds, or a couple of 40-something-year-olds for that matter. There's no way that brothers and sisters growing up in the same household know what the future, where life is going to take them, what kind of people they'll turn out to be. There's no way of knowing that. There's no way of knowing what our spouse or our parents might need from us in the later years of their lives. But faithfulness is about just being there for them, no matter what the future holds. And it begins with a decision, and it's sustained by thousands and thousands of decisions. So before I go any further, let me just pause for a minute and ask, is there a faithfulness decision you need to make about some relationship in your family circle? Is God prompting you, as he prompted Joseph and Mary, to make a move towards someone in your family circle, even though you don't know how it's going to turn out? So that's how this holy family got started, not under the best of circumstances, but with a decision to be faithful. So let's see what happens next. We'll jump ahead to Luke chapter 2, verse 39. When Joseph and Mary had done everything required by the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was on him. So we're on the other side of the birth narratives now. There's no more signs in the heavens. There's no angels singing. There's no shepherds barging in. There's no distinguished visitors from foreign lands. They're back home now, in a small, middle-of-nowhere town called Nazareth. And Mary and Joseph are doing what parents do, going to work, putting food on the table, changing diapers, going over lessons, tucking kids into bed, practicing their faith. Not very dramatic, not very exciting. Same for Jesus, by the way. There are no angels helping him with his homework. There's no snapping his fingers and the bed is made. It's all very ordinary and mundane and maybe even tedious at times. Let me show you my favorite painting of the Holy Family. It was done by Michelangelo. It was commissioned by a wealthy patron as a wedding gift for his bride. It's one of the few panel paintings we have of Michelangelo. Now, as it turned out, the patron hated it. He was offended by the artist's portrayal of the Holy Family as ordinary working class people. Notice the realism of the figures. Joseph's bald head and furrowed brow. Mary's muscular arms. Jesus squirming in his parents' grasp as the two of them try to wrangle him into place. This is every family in the Sears photo booth right here. Sit still for the picture. As you can see the whole picture, they're seated right on the grass, as if they belong to earth as much as heaven. Michelangelo understood something that other artists had missed, that the Holy Family was not always so holy after all. That word holy means different, other, set apart. And there certainly was something different about Jesus and this family, but there was also something very ordinary about this family as well. For the next 30 years, there would be no miracles, no signs in the heavens, no relief from the tedium, no rescue from the trouble of life. So those 30 years called for faithfulness. And faithfulness means sticking with each other even when it's ordinary. Whatever a home looks like for you right now, it probably looks pretty ordinary. Most of the time, the same routine, the same chores. And how many hours have you spent on the job or in the kitchen to put food on the table for the people that you love? How many times have you told your kids to brush their teeth or read Goodnight Moon to them? How many phone calls have you made to your parents or to your siblings just to see how they're doing? I spoke to a father the other day whose 5th child had just been potty trained. And he had just calculated that he changed about 32,000 diapers in those 13 years. There's nothing very exciting or dramatic about those kinds of things. Family can get really mundane. But all those hours, all those meals on the table, all those phone calls, all those diaper changes, they all add up to something, and it's called belonging. The sense that someone cares about you, that there's a place for you, that there's people for you, that there's a connection, that you're valuable, that you matter to someone somewhere. So if you're feeling weary of the whole family thing right now, worn out, if after putting all the Christmas decorations away, the house in the calendar looks pretty ordinary, be encouraged. What you're doing matters. It adds up to something. God honors it. And we'll talk about it more later on in the series when we get to the subject of nurture. But enough for now to know that faithfulness means sticking with each other, even when it's ordinary. Every so often, though, something happens that's not so ordinary, as it did to the Holy Family. Just about the time Jesus became a teenager. Surprise, surprise. They went to Jerusalem for the Passover, and along with thousands of other families, and as we know the story, somewhere along the way, they lost track of Jesus. Been there, done that. Happens to the best of us, okay? Let's pick up the story, chapter 2, verse 46. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Doesn't feel like a very holy moment, does it? It feels uncomfortable. It feels like they're not understanding each other. It feels almost like they're disappointed in each other. And it feels pretty familiar, doesn't it? It's not just parents and teenagers who struggle to understand each other. It's husbands and wives, and brothers and sisters. And let's not even get started on the in-laws, okay? It's just... I find it so interesting and so revealing that we are given only one incident from Jesus' home life. One. And it's a story of conflict. Because that's inevitably what happens when you put people, human beings, in close proximity to one another, which of course is what home does. Well, look what happens in the aftermath of that little incident. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. In spite of the misunderstanding and the disappointment, they went home together and carried on as members of a family. So faithfulness means sticking with each other even when we disappoint each other. Even when we don't understand each other. A few years ago, I was skiing for the day with one of my young adult sons, who at that point was out of the house and on his own. And riding up the chairlift, we got into a conversation about an incident that had happened years ago when he was a teenager. Now, it came up rather innocently, but it very quickly became obvious that there was still some lingering tension over this incident. He was frustrated with my decision. And I was still troubled by his reaction. It also became obvious that one more conversation was not going to set the whole thing straight. So we rode the rest of the way to the top of the lift in silence. Did our best to shake off the tension as we buckled our boots and adjusted our goggles and then headed off down the mountain together. I don't think we'll ever see eye to eye over that particular incident. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe he was too stubborn. But we made a decision that day, an unspoken one, that disappointing incident was not going to keep us from enjoying a day on the slopes together. And more importantly, was not going to keep us from enjoying and doing life together for many, many years to come. But we'll talk more about conflict and reconciliation later in the series. But for now, enough to say that faithfulness means sticking with each other, even when we disappoint each other, because we will. A family isn't just about parents and children, it's about siblings as well. It's not just about the people who live under a roof together. Family goes on for the rest of your life, right? So let's take a quick look at something that happens to Jesus' family after he's left home and begun his work. It's found in John chapter 7. John chapter 7, beginning at verse 2. But when the Jewish festival of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, "Leave Galilee and go to Judea, so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world, even his own brothers. Can you hear the sarcasm? The not so good-natured teasing from these brothers? So you think you're a big shot, do you, Jesus?